Hi, I'm Jonathan Leeman. Welcome to this episode of Pastoring in a Pandemic, where we have a daily conversation, at least for the month of May, with different friends of mine, pastor friends of mine, about different things that are challenges or opportunities or struggles or joys for pastors in this unusual time that we're presently in. And today I have a friend from way back in seminary, back in the early 2000s, Jeremy Pierre. Jeremy, brother, thanks so much for joining us.
Happy to join. Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
Jeremy is a pastor at Clifton Baptist Church in Louisville, Kentucky. He is also a counselor and professor of counseling at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, and he is the author of this 9 Marks book, The Pastor in Counseling, The Basics of Shepherding Members in Need. Thank you for writing that, and thank you for your ministry to us and so many others. Brother, I'm grateful to have this time to talk with you. One question, though,
Yeah.
I like to start with is we're low budget. We don't have music playing in the background. What would be your walk-on music, your entrance music?
Walk-on music. Okay, so I'm going up to the plate, right?
You had the plate, the stage.
Well, if I'm in Sunday school, I'm going to say something like Andrew Peterson's He Is Worthy or Is He Worthy? But if I'm actually at a baseball game, I'm going Van Halen, Jump. Just old school.
How does that go? Remind me.
Dun, 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 and then I can't do the rest because then it starts to become multi-layered and it's
might as well jump.
You might as well jump.
Well, let's jump into the conversation now.
Oh no, that was terrible.
What I'd like to talk with you about, brother, is you're a professor of counseling. You've written on counseling. You talk about counseling, and we're in a moment where counseling is perhaps a little bit unusual, right? You can't have people into your office, or at least that's been the case. Maybe churches are opening up, maybe you have more opportunity. But also, I think new things are coming to the surface. So as you've been looking out at the landscape at what you see other churches are dealing with or what you've been dealing with in your own congregation, are new kinds of issues coming up because of the quarantine and the pandemic?
I wouldn't say new kinds of issues, though it may feel new to the people who are experiencing them. Yeah. If that makes sense. So you know, I always teach my students at Southern that human experience really comprises of two main categories with tons of subsets to it, but it's basically context and then response. Okay, so the context is the external environment with all the factors of relationships and events and God himself and just everything. And then response is how we, from our spiritual agency, then respond to those things, right?
Yeah.
So a pandemic is just and all these restrictions are the perfect example of like a major shift in context. And thus, we're suddenly finding ourselves having to respond to things that are very different than what we expected. So it might feel new to people in terms of the responses that they're having, but really, it's just provoked or triggered by a difference in the context.
A phrase that keeps coming to mind for me is, as I describe people, how are you doing? What's going on? I'm like, well, things are good, but it does feel like a microwave. That's the word I've been using. Sort of all of us in the house together, wife, 4 kids, sort of heats up what's already there in a sense, really fast. What are you seeing then heating up? What are the types of things that are coming to the surface more frequently in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I could just summarize the major contextual change a pandemic brings is it sort of disrupts our carefully arranged lives. Okay, it disrupts the things that we've worked so hard to arrange in the way that we want them. Okay, if you're asking for more specifics on what I mean by that, you can think in a couple categories come to my mind, right? So we arrange our lives to be highly as convenient and comfortable as possible. So our conveniences and comforts have been disrupted. I can't get away from my family, right? In my normal life, there are routines that I have. There are even car rides that I enjoy where I get space from everybody else. And it's funny how you come to rely on those things, right? Well, now that's different. And so now I'm having to respond to a new difference. So there's like the convenience, comfort arrangements. Then there's like livelihood / provision types of ways we've arranged our lives to ensure that we're more likely to get what we want. So you work hard at a career, you hit the trail doing anything that your job needs to do to kind of bring you into a greater sense of assurance that you're going to get that promotion or you're going to secure your paycheck and things like that. Well, this pandemic has disrupted at that level. That's an even more basic level than sort of convenience and comfort. And so we're feeling the threats to basic things that we want and that we are sort of arranging our lives to get. And then the last category that comes to mind is kind of similarly related.
Okay, I'm sorry. Recap. So the first is
convenience,
comfort,
livelihood,
livelihood.
And then I'm just going to add maybe our plans and our aspirations. Okay. Those have been disrupted. Like what your sort of future orientation. Hey, by June, I should be able to blank, right? Whether it's going on a vacation, or whether it's hitting certain sales numbers, or whether it's finishing a writing project, or whatever it is, that has totally been disrupted. And so a lot of the desires related to these, these three categories I'm just randomly throwing out, a lot of the desires related to those have been disrupted. They're under threat. And that then I think affects the way we start responding to this, often in ugly ways.
What I enjoy about these conversations is people often take them in directions I wasn't anticipating. So when I ask the question, what things are coming up, I'm expecting you to say things like fears, loneliness, anxieties, and all of that's in there. But what I hear you saying, in a sense, is control.
Well,
I don't have a control of my comfort, my livelihood, my future, and my plans. Isn't that what you're describing?
Yeah, sort of. Okay. So control can be a desire that drives us, but control is more often, I think, a method or a tactic that we use in order to gain the things that we're wanting. Right. Mm-hmm. So I always try to think in terms of the level of the desire. So if you can do that and identify the things that we want that are now being threatened, that then is a good explanation for why we are lonely. Maybe one person's lonely. Maybe another person is anxious. Maybe another person is angry. Okay. For instance, in the guys that I'm ministering to in our church, I would actually say that the flavor that we're having to deal with most is on the anger, anxiety side, not the loneliness, isolation side. Yeah. And you can trace those back to, well, why are you angry? Well, you're wanting something that in the prior situation, you kind of had assumed that's been taken away from you. And it's sometimes even as basic things as peace and quiet. It's sometimes the more complex things like, I really was expecting to be able to afford that trip or finally add on to our house with that thing. And now my wealth is diminished by, 25%. And there's just this, I can't control it, to your point, Jonathan. I can't control it. And that's really frustrating to me. So I'm going to control what I can control. And that is, I'm going to shut you up by being mean. I'm going to, whatever it is.
Yeah, right. Okay, so talk me through some of the conversations you might have. Somebody comes with you. He says, I am angry. I'm really struggling with being angry at my wife and kids.
Yep.
Or I was expecting to have this bonus, and now that bonus is being denied because the company is doing cutbacks, and I'm despondent. Walk me through how you counsel somebody.
Yep. Well, first I'm going to ask him, what does he mean by angry? Okay. Because not every, or depressed or whatever word he's using, I'm not going to assume I know what he means by it. Okay. So tell me what you mean. How's that coming out? How are you treating your wife? How are you treating your children? When you think about your boss, are you getting sort of hot temperatured? Like, tell me what your thoughts going through your mind are. In other words, I want to understand his experience that he's describing by using words like anger. And then I'm going to move basically to just help him see, where does that come from? And so where that comes from, a really easy way to ask that, and I'm really simplifying a process here, obviously, for our purposes here, but I'm going to ask him, what does your anger show that you're wanting? Okay. All of our responses, all of our emotions can be traced back in part. This isn't the full explanation, but it can be traced back in part to a driving desire. So when I'm angry, it's because I want something that I perceive someone or something else as hindering me from. And I'm against that thing. I'm against that person because they're hindering me from that desire. And so that's how you help a guy even understand what's underneath his anger. And then once you've identified that, right, then you can coach him through, what does it mean to not just repent at the level of my anger? Hey, sorry for being so mad, sweetheart. But you repent at the level of desire, even before the Lord. Like, God, I was wanting peace and quiet. I was wanting that bonus. I was valuing those things more than I was valuing putting my trust in you, than I was valuing the family that you've given me. Will you forgive me for that? Now, that doesn't make anger like just dissipate and suddenly you're like the most calm person in the world and you never struggle with irritation again. But what it is you're just perpetually chipping away at the cause of that anger so that it doesn't take over and become the main characteristic that your family knows you by during the pandemic.
So we're talking kind of James 4 sort of stuff. What causes fights and quarrels among you?
James 4 is a wonderful passage for kind of giving the anatomy of conflicts. A conflict starts within. We are
Yeah.
our loyalties. What's interesting about James 4 is he says, what causes fights and quarrels? Is it not this, that your passions, your desires are at war within you, you fight and quarrel. And he goes on to say, you adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? What does adultery have to do with it? What does friendship with the world have to do with it? What he's saying is, you show that your loyalties lie more with what you're insisting on getting and you're willing to go to war for. They lie more with those things than they do with your God. And God won't have it because he yearned zealously for the Spirit to live within you and to motivate your behaviors. So I guess if there's any comfort to anger, and listen, I've been more irritated than ever, probably just like anybody else. I hope you, Jonathan, except for maybe you're much more sanctified than I am. In this pandemic,
It's the microwave, man. We're all being microwaved.
yeah, that's right. We're getting microwaves. But here's the deal. It exposes my need for Jesus in ways that my daily arrangement of life normally doesn't expose. And so
Yeah.
in one sense, we can kind of become more aware of our gospel dependence.
Yeah. Well put. Okay. I want to transition from here's the conversations I'm having with, guys in the church, men, women in the church who call you up and are struggling with something,
Yeah.
to kind of the more traditional counseling cases that you might take on, say a troubled marriage. I want to think about, say, a troubled
Right.
marriage. You can't access under quarantine. You can't access that troubled marriage.
Yeah.
Couple comes into the office, sit down with them, work it out. How is that going in the, say, tougher counseling cases at the moment?
Yeah, you gotta be. Here's this. You're not gonna love this answer because I don't love this answer. Okay, but you gotta be realistic with what can be accomplished according to the platforms available to you. Right? There's so much that you need in marriage counseling, being in the same room together. You can kind of read the dynamic between them. You can tell when the guy's getting hot under the collar. You can kind of sense when the wife might be uh, getting particularly emotional about a particular topic. Um, and you can kind of then make the right adjustments in your approach based on what you're seeing in front of you. I'm sorry, this Zoom, it's wonderful to see your face, dude, but there's just no way. I mean, this is contrived. And so there's just a layer of necessary touch that you lose. And so the better thing to do is to ask, okay, what can be accomplished with this particular platform? And honestly, I think just again, this is what I've just found to be true. it generally just works better if I'm talking to one of the two of them about what they are experiencing and then processing how to respond to that biblically for this time in hopes of getting to a point where we can kind of all be back together and really sort this out.
I'm sorry. So you're not doing with both couples. You're just doing
I'm
one
not
at a
saying it's
time.
impossible, and probably many of my friends who are more faithful than me and have more availability are maybe even doing the couples counseling. I personally am not doing that right now. That's
Okay,
not
because
just
the
to be clear.
medium of
That's not by conviction. That's more by I'm having to choose how to
doesn't seem to
best use my
work.
time. Yeah.
No, I get it entirely. Um, have you seen an uptick in marriage struggles?
Yes and no. So what I'm reading and what I'm seeing online and just from other pastors calling me for consultation, I'd say probably yes. But in terms of my own immediate ministry context, no, I haven't necessarily
Okay,
seen that.
it's in some ways I'm not really sure I want to go here in this conversation. But one thing that's been on my heart and I've prayed about personally, and our church has actually prayed about
Yeah.
is those people in abusive situations.
Yes.
This
Yep.
this should
Yep.
probably be a
Yep.
conversation of its own, but I want you to acknowledge that is a conversation
Yeah.
to have. That
Yes.
some of
That's right.
these troubled marriages or family settings where abuse
Yeah.
occurs, ah, everybody's
It's
stuck.
awful, and they're even more stuck. They're even more prisoners of a situation of manipulation. Okay.
Yeah,
Can I throw out what I think is a really important principle for any
yeah, please,
pastors listening here?
yeah,
If I wish I could look pastors, my fellow pastors in the eyes and just say, if you get a disclosure of domestic abuse going on right now, this is always a good principle, but it's especially important here. You need to initially receive that with all sincerity, regardless of your opinion of how sane or insane, stable or unstable, trustworthy or untrustworthy you think that woman is, okay, who's doing the disclosure. Let me point out here, this is especially true in a pandemic. You guys know the phrase the fog of war, right? It just means that when you're in the middle of a battle, there's no way you can accumulate all the knowledge you need to make a strategic, an overall strategy in terms of direction for moving forward. I'm just telling you, you don't have access to have the adequate knowledge to kind of make your whatever pronouncement or judgment or call that you need. So the principle is you receive that as it is, and you then respond by helping her make a strategy that prioritizes her safety. Okay. So that's always kind of step number one. I'm actually just finishing up a work with Greg Wilson, a friend of mine who's a professional counselor, on a book. We're calling it When Home Hurts. It is actually a strategy on how church leaders can respond to domestic violence or abuse disclosures within their own churches. Okay. So this isn't on the theory of it. It's not a global view of of all the demographics of studies that go on to domestic abuse. It's I want to be able to put a book into the hand of a pastor when he has someone in his church saying, my husband's abusing me, and he's like, man, what do I even do? We try to make it very practical, sort of walk through that prioritizes the safety of any victim or potential victim, and then also responsibly handles pastorally getting involved in the right ways and not in the wrong ways that might actually make it worse. So I didn't mean that to be an advertisement. I'm just telling you, I've been having to think through these issues
yeah.
quite a bit lately, and I really want to reiterate that principle. You receive that and trust that a careful process is going to not allow for whatever false accusations you're worried about to kind of do sort of lasting damage in any situation. Your first instinct should not be to protect men from false accusation. It should first be to make sure that anyone who's vulnerable, women, children, are safe.
There should be a kind of a, if I'm going to err in one direction, I'm going to err in that direction.
That's right. It's a triage of good values, right? And you're putting as first primary safety. So my encouragement, friends, is don't wait to do sort of an investigation before you create a plan that would act for her safety. Okay.
Does the quarantine stay-at-home orders affect what we can do? I mean, people have asked me that question. I'm just like, yeah. So right now, actually, before this phone call, my wife's going over to seeing a widow in the church who is a cancer survivor, and she's sitting outside of the driveway, speaking through a screen.
Yeah.
Right? She
It's
can't
tough.
have access.
Yep.
Okay, but now we're dealing with. I'm not really sure what it
I know.
goes of letting it
Jonathan,
go. You're
listen,
just, woo.
the hardest, we all know this. All of us as pastors and church leaders know this. The hardest decisions are not between right and wrong. The hardest decisions are a tension of values, good values. And so your question is exactly that. We want to be generally submissive to the guidelines being laid down for us. We want to slow the spread of this virus and be on team with our community and all the rest. But here you may have a situation where someone's under much greater threat to their health than any virus can do it. So in the tension of values, I mean, arrange
Take
it,
the
protect
risk.
it, take the risk.
Yeah, I think that's a good word. You're and resources that are out right now. Where should somebody pastor with this particular question of, like, I have a home where I need to report, or I think something might be going on. Where are you pushing people at this moment to better understand that? Like, you just ran through several things that was super helpful, but I'm still feeling I need my legs here.
Yeah.
What do I do?
So to understand kind of what the heart of abuse is actually like, I have found the most work that I do with just consulting pastors or elder boards is on even helping them understand what are abuse dynamics and what's the mentality of an abuser. Because the first question they want to ask is, well, did he hit her? And what they're asking is, that's not an unreasonable question, right? But what we're anchoring ourselves to with that question is, what's the legal or criminal definition of abuse? But abuse has dynamics much wider and deeper than that, right? And so Chris Moles has a really good resource called The Heart of Domestic Abuse. If you were to Google even his name, he has a really helpful website called, I'm man alive, it's blanking, Peaceworks, I think it's called. And he has a lot of different resources that could help you to sort of just start to get the background knowledge you need to understand what some of these ladies who are disclosing abuse to us, what they're going through. And so that we can approach it with a greater degree of knowledge. So I would strongly recommend him as a starting point, and he'll link out to many other helpful things that you're going to see. He's a way better kind of resource list than me, if that makes sense. So.
Yeah, sure. Something I've discovered in this conversation over the last couple of years, 2-3 years, is how little I do know, and how much I do need to equip myself, and our elders need to equip themselves. It is a tough topic. It's a more complicated topic than honestly I recognized. Even Nine Marks has thought about, hey, let's write something, provide a resource on this or that. We quickly discovered, okay, we're not experts here.
Oh, listen, and I have fear and trepidation even saying, like, I'm working on a book. I only agreed to do it because I could secure a co-author who has banked thousands of hours of experience with this. And then what I add to it is, I'm kind of the pastoral counselor type who comes in and thinks of it from what this means and implies for the community and pastoral ministry and things like that. So we hope that together that will result in something. But Jonathan, I've been feeling the exact same way. Like, even right now, there are so many subtle dynamics to it that you really have to responsibly be aware of to handle these situations. It's just that shouldn't paralyze us, right?
Yeah.
But it should make us humble in our approach to those things.
Well, I mean, so here we are talking about counseling. This end of the spectrum, it's kind of like every day, hey, I'm really struggling because I don't get to go on my vacation, and now I'm angry about it, all the way over here to, struggling marriages, all the way over here to tougher,
Yeah.
say, abuse situation. It's
Yeah.
like I said, I wasn't planning on getting over here, but it's hard not to kind of eventually stray there.
I know.
But I'm so grateful for the work you do, brother, in helping us think through and across that spectrum. And we certainly all have a lot to do about learn to how to pastor and shepherd brothers and sisters at every point
Yeah.
along that
Yep.
kind of challenge difficulty spectrum. Last question I want to ask for you. We've run over time. Last question I wanted to ask is 2, 3 years from now, we're looking back on this, Lord willing. Lord
Mm.
willing, maybe we've kind of emerged from it. What do you want to have learned about the Lord through all of this?
So I have to answer that in the additional context of the fact that my our house 2 months ago burnt. And so we're sort of displaced and now in a rental home. It literally burned the same day that the COVID restrictions began. So we are just living in a bizarre
Nuts.
alternate universe. Okay. But
Yes, you are.
so that's the context of what I want to say I would have learned by now.
And you have
that
an
is-
article on that at TGC for people.
Yeah, it's called
TGC,
We're
Jeremy
All
Pierre.
Children. We're All Children Now, I think is the name of the article.
Good piece.
But what I want to have learned is that the Lord is our home. Our home is not down here. That's the irony of being stuck at home, right? It's in the context of this situation that actually, like, we're reminded in 1,000 ways that this world's not our home. Like, I can't do the things that I once did, the things that I once assumed, the comforts that I once arranged. They've been disassembled, they've been disrupted. And it really is a good reminder that our hearts will find security, settledness, rest, peace in the Lord. And we get little tastes of it here, like our homes. I love my home. I love my family. I love being home with them. Those are wonderful tastes of what's to come, but it should drive us towards always pursuing what's to come. And I have found God to be my home in these last 2 months, and it's a miracle of His grace, because my heart is so want to stray from that home, and yet He always pulls me back, and I always find Him receptive. So very grateful.
Amen. Amen. Might as well jump to trusting in the Lord.
That is absolutely atrocious.
Thanks for your time, brother. Glad
All
to
right,
be with
buddy.
you.
Yep.